so much for being here this morning. If you are new, maybe relatively new, and you're not sure who I am, my name is Ken, and I am the location pastor here at Hope Chapel Legends. Can't tell you how happy I am that you are here today. If I were the only one to show up, this whole scenario changes, and it's a lot less fun. So I'm really glad that you are here this morning, and it's like Bree said. You picked a great Sunday to be here. You probably noticed there's some new items out there in the foyer. We have some new Hope Chapel merch that just came out for the fall, and if you're interested in that, again, I'm my best Vanna White here, This is the one that's not out there, but we do have the polos that are out there with the Hope Chapel on them. You can see everything else out there. Everything is pre-order. If you want to do that, you can just scan the QR code. You can pre-order. Hopefully, all of that will be here next week as you order it. So we don't want to, I know when you buy something, you're like, I'm wearing it the next day to school. That's the way we all work, right? So anyway, we're excited you're here. Well, this morning, this is the only morning out of the entire year that we are going to take a break from our series that we started in January, the Essential series. This is the only Sunday out of the entire week that we are taking a break. That must mean it's pretty important. And so we are going to be looking and celebrating at some things about where we've been and where God is taking us into this next season, which I believe you're going to find is very, very exciting. Well, next week, we're going to jump back into the Essential series, and we're going to, as you guys know, we do it big here at Hope Chapel. Last week we took on 150 chapters in Psalms. So that's the first time I've preached 150 chapters in one time. Next week, we're jumping into Proverbs, and we're going to preach the Proverbs next week. So it's going to be a good time. One of the Proverbs that gives us insight into why today like today is really important to us is this. Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint. Now, some of you may know this verse is where there is no vision, the people perish. Same verse. But blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instructions. The word revelation in the Hebrew means divine vision or divine revelation. So this is not just, I went on Google and I found all this stuff. That's the way we live our life in every other realm. How do I do this? I Google it. That's step one of every instruction now. How do I change my oil? I Google it, then I change my oil. How do I Google it, then I do this. This is not Google, okay? This is divine vision. This is divine. This is the divine word. It's not intellectual knowledge. It's not practical wisdom. This is a forward-thinking expression that God gives us. Okay, this is God coming in and saying, not only this is what I want, but this is who I am, and this is what I'm doing with all of that as I'm moving forward. So it's this divine insight that God gives us as He leads and guides. And I hope you understand something. I hope that God doesn't just speak to pastors and missionaries this way. I hope you realize that in your everyday life, God is giving you vision. God is always speaking. God is speaking to you. There's not just this certain group of people that God talks to, and then we have to make sure we get it out in email or something. It doesn't work that way. But God is talking to you. God is speaking into your life, and it's not just don't do this, do that. He's actually speaking about guidance. He's actually speaking about vision. He's actually speaking about these great things that He wants to do in and through you. So this verse continues to instruct us how to respond to that insight. And the original text says, He who follows the law, now again, that would mean the Torah, that would mean those first 5 books of the Bible, will be happy. He who follows the law will be happy. And we know from the earlier time that we spent in the Essential series that the Torah was also the way that people understood what God's plan was. Remember, from the very beginning, when we started out in creation, we all talk about, well, there was light and there was dark and there was land and there was sea and there were animals and there were plants and all of that, you can wrap that up and go, God has a plan. God has a plan. And then man came into the picture, God has a plan. We messed up the plan, God came back with a plan. And then Noah was a plan, and Abraham was a plan, and the wilderness was a plan, and Mount Sinai was a plan. And all the way through, it's God has a plan. God is not just sitting up in heaven rolling dice going, I hope today works. It's not the way it works. And so he's telling us that there's this way that we can understand the plan and the story that God has created. And so when we think about this future vision, we're also talking about the continuation of God's eternal, unchanging heart. Again, God's plan is not based on strategy. It's not just based off of metrics. It's actually his heart at work, right? So we're always called to follow in this divine revelation and not in our own strength. Even as churches, even as a body of believers, we're not called to do it with just the best statistics and the best church growth plan and the best programs and the best curriculums. We're actually called to do it. We're actually called to be a part of following God's divine revelation. That's not just me. That's not just our leadership team. That's all of us together. We are a body. Unless you're really, really, really double jointed, your leg just doesn't break off and start walking its own way, right? No, we're a body. We move together. The Old Testament story tells us that when the people followed God, what happened? They were blessed. When they didn't, what happened? It didn't turn out very well, right? When the people did what was right in their own eyes, they eventually failed. So as a church, it's in our personal lives, our goal on a regular basis needs to be, are we following God? In your personal life, are you following God? Are the decisions that you're making in your home, in your marriage, as you raise your kids, with your finances, on your job, are you following God? As a church, then, when we come together as a body of believers, are we doing it in a way where we are following God and we are projecting Jesus to the community around us? Is that, or are we doing this just on our own agenda? Are we just coming in and going, oh man, I'm so glad I have a church. I'm so glad Sunday came. I just came. I got my tank filled. Now I'm out to do my own thing. You say, I don't know, Ken. And maybe that's true. Maybe you're here and you're like, I don't know. Let me tell you how you find out. When you don't know where to go, what do? Anybody ever lose their keys? Anybody ever lose their cell phone? The craziness that goes through your head in that moment, the world is ending. The world is ending. We are now unconnected. We have gone from, I had a cell phone, and now I'm living in 1876. What am I going to do? And we panic. And we start throwing couch cushions, and we're opening cabinets. We're looking in the freezer for our phone, right? When everything tells us, go back to the last place you were, right? Doesn't that make more sense? We don't do that. We just start throwing stuff because we are so afraid that we're going to get stuck, that in the next 30 seconds, something is going to happen and it's not going to be on our Facebook and we are going to be lost forever. Go back to where you started. Always go back to the last thing that God asked you to do. Even if it's the last thing you want to do. See, that's the hard part, because sometimes the last thing God asks us to do happens to be the thing. That's why it's the last, because it never got done, right? Because God said, do this, and we're like, no. And so now we have to go back to the last thing that God asked us to do. And it's vital that we never forget what God has already said to us. And this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about a vision for the next season, a vision for us as individuals, a vision for us as a church here at Legends, a vision for our community as we are one church that's spread out all over the Kansas City metro. And it's not a vision that's filled with a lot of grand plans. You're not going to hear me present to you any kitschy new ideas. There's not going to be any elaborate building campaigns. We're not going to build a Disneyland for Christians here in Kansas City. Sorry, those of you that you were like, man, I came to church to hear that today. And we're going to go back this morning because the original vision is always the most powerful. Think about it from where we've been. Yeah, there was a lot of cool things that happened. Noah, Abraham, Mount Sinai, all those things, and we read those things and we're like, ooh, dude, that was cool. Go back to the original vision. There is nothing more powerful than the creation story. To create something out of nothing with a word, there is nothing more powerful than that. And it's actually the pattern that is laid out throughout all of those other things. So there's nothing more powerful than the original vision. That's why we all love a good origin story, right? We all love a good origin. Someone that started a business from scratch. Who's the guy in the room that started a band in your garage? Anybody start a band in your garage? Anybody? You're just embarrassed. You're not gonna go. Come on, you could have been the next Nirvana. Think about that, man. Nobody started a band in their garage? Okay. But think about that. How many of these guys just, they start these bands and just out of their garage, and now they're making millions, right? Someone maybe had a tragedy that turned to a triumph. We love those stories. We love those. And throughout the Essential series, we've continually stated that from the origin of known time, God said and continues to say, I'm going to create places, I'm going to create opportunities where He can connect with people so that they could be fulfilled and fulfilling His creative life-transforming process. So again, that's the origin story. That's all of our origin story. Where did we start? We started with the fact that we are fearfully and wonderfully made by God. And in that space, He connects with us so that we can be fulfilled in fulfilling His purpose. That's our origin story for everybody. And that vision, the original thought of God, has been transforming the world one person at a time all throughout history. And it's been building our church one person at a time. Because, the most powerful, the most potent vision tends to be the first one. And remembering the beginning helps you chart your course to the future. In our church, like many others, we return to an original vision every year. Did you guys know that? Every year we return to the original vision. Easter is the original vision. Hate to tell you this, on Easter, there's no new content. Surprise, no surprise, right? There's no surprise ending to Easter. Christmas, no new content. It is going to be what it is, right? Why? Because it's the original vision. It's the original vision. And throughout the year, we intentionally use the phrase, find hope, bring hope. Returning to the vision matters because here's what it does. And you may be the person that you're like, man, if he says find hope, bring hope one more time. But here's the reason why we do that. Because vision leaks. Sometimes we hear it so much that it just becomes wah, 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 we call that mission drift. We call that mission drift. It keeps, when we are always talking about what the vision is, it keeps the main thing the main thing. It keeps us from allowing our own ideas, our ideologies from taking priority. It keeps us from losing sight of the original purpose for why we are and what we do. See, if we get off mission, that begins to look like compromise. That's what it does. It begins to look like it's misplaced trust in God. It's like, well, God, I don't know that you really had the best plan. Psalm 78, verse 9 says, the warriors of Ephraim, though armed with bows, again, these guys are fighters. It wasn't like the farmers of Ephraim. It was the warriors of Ephraim, though armed with bows, turned their backs and they fled on the day of the battle. You know why? They did not keep God's covenant, number one, and they refused to live by his instructions. But here's the kicker. They forgot what he had done. They forgot what the original vision was. They forgot the original purpose. And when it came time to show up, even though they were trained, even though they were armed, they said, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. Why? They were off mission. They were off mission. So today, in Olathe, in our Olathe campus, our church is celebrating 40 years of ministry. 40 years of ministry in Olathe. And I wish I had time to tell you the whole story, but it's an original vision of developing a church actually for a city. Not just a church in a city, but my oldest son, Brendan, again, who's on our staff, actually saw this. He was a part of the filming of this. When they birthed this church, they had a list of 22 locations. They came up with a list 40 years ago of 22 locations that they wanted to be in across the city. And reflecting on 40 years of how God has worked through that original vision is something that I think we need to do. I want you to take a look at this.
"40 years ago, 7 families gathered in a living room in Olathe, Kansas, with one shared desire: that their neighbors would find hope in Jesus just as they had. They knew that God was calling them to plant a new church. They didn't have a building, they didn't have many people, but they had something bigger: faith. They prayed, they dreamed, they listened, and God gave them a vision that this wouldn't just be one church, but a church for the entire city in multiple locations. They took a bold step of obedience. This new church was founded in September of 1985. Little did they know that God was at work behind the scenes, setting the stage for that vision to come to fruition over 3 decades later. It wasn't just them that God was speaking to, but he was also speaking into the hearts of other pastors and leaders, planting a vision that we could be better together.
We just began to pray and say, God, what do you want to do here in this next season? And God never does the thing you expect him to do. Like, we have such a rich heritage, a rich legacy, a church community that's ready for change, thinking that we have all these plans. And then over the first 12 months, engaging in conversation around expansion, that just wasn't in the cards. And yet God began to open door after door after door around this idea of becoming a church in multiple locations. And as we began to walk that journey out, become educated, open ourselves up in prayer, consult, do the things that we felt right to do, it became so clear that this is the story that God was going to weave in a way that we could never expect it.
I feel like for us, the last 8 years really has been just a lesson in being led by the Spirit. And a lot of the most amazing stories that have come out of this church have not been strategic plans on paper, but they really have been God opening doors and us saying, all right, I guess that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that through becoming a church for the city and multi-site. We've seen that through the birth of new ministries like Trellis that has gone national and is all across the U.S. and partnering with 10 different schools now. And we're just seeing people that we don't even know being raised up and sent out into ministry. And it's an expression of this house through the start of a counseling center. But then there are some things that have just remained the same that you just never get away from. And one of the things I love is that our vision, our mission statement of leading people to experience real life in Jesus for the hope of the world, that has been the same. We are all about leading people to Jesus and helping them to find hope in him and bring hope to the world. And that I never want to get away from.
Little did we know that back in that living room in 1985, God gave those founding families a vision that we would be a church for the entire city. Not one congregation with one location, but many. God began to open doors for multiplication. Opportunities came in Lee Summit and in Kansas City, Kansas, for churches to merge in and join the mission. As the church became a citywide movement, it was clear that a new name was needed that was not tied to the geographic realities of each church's location, a name that would encompass our heart to reach the entire city for Jesus. So, on Easter Sunday in 2020, Hope Chapel was born. One name, one mission, one prayer for the whole city, that all would find hope in Jesus and bring hope to the world around them. God is still writing this story of multiplication, just as he did in the book of Acts. In 2022, Hope Chapel Legends joined our church family, and in September 2024, Hope Chapel downtown was planted. From 7 families in a living room to a citywide movement.
The people and the community at Hope Chapel have really been able to put that connection for both my wife and I, and being able to actually connect with God and see, oh, he wants to have a relationship with me.
Even though I haven't been here a year, Hope Chapel has given me the hope that I didn't know I needed. And I'm so excited to keep coming here and eventually hope to bring my family here and bring my friends.
It made me feel like I belonged here. I didn't feel like I was just gonna walk into a church and walk out and be just another person.
To see what is going on now and to be able to live long enough to see it on top of that is a great blessing. And I'm just truly thankful for that.
And now, today, we stand in the beauty of the story God has been writing for 40 years. 5 congregations, thousands of lives changed, countless prayers answered, and yet, we believe this is only the beginning. Because the same God who called these 7 families together in 1985 is calling us today to keep going, to keep loving, to keep bringing the hope of Jesus to every neighborhood, every street, every heart, every generation. We are one church with one mission, sharing one hope. That hope has carried us through 40 years and will carry us into the next 40. This is our legacy. This is our calling. This is Hope Chapel.
It is a pretty cool story. As a matter of fact, the one lady that they kept showing sitting on the couch, her husband is the founder of the Hope Chapel Vision. And you also may know him as the founder of Garmin. He is the gentleman that discovered GPS. And and his heart was for Jesus the whole time. And it's an amazing story. But what about here at Legends? Because we merged in. We came in to an existing thing. Think about this. We were a part of a vision. When people sat down in a house, 7 people, and they drafted out this list of 22 locations, I don't know that they wrote down Legends because Legends wasn't even a thing. But we were a part of that. We were a location that was a part of that. Here in Legends, we are actually approaching our opportunity to celebrate 100 years. In 3 years, we will have had 100 years of faith existence in this community. There were tent revivals. We got some pictures. There were tent revivals that started back in the day. Look at that. That is actually a tent revival. That tent seats over 2,000 people. There were tent revivals where thousands heard the gospel back in the day. We were a mega church before the term mega church existed. This is the original church on Scott. That's the original building right there. And literally, we found creative ways to minister the gospel. This is, I think, Easter, 1943. 1,053 people in the building. 1,053 people in the building on Easter. And then again, we got created. We had the largest singing Christmas tree. Look at that. Look at that. You can't even see the top. But can you imagine being the person at the top? Hope you don't have vertigo up there. We bust children in, hundreds of children we bust them in, which translated as the family of the core pastor, H.W. Barnett. His family actually launched the largest bus ministry in 2 different cities. Phoenix First, back in the day, had 43 running buses into the Phoenix metro area. A few years later, when the City of Angels Hospital was going to be demolished in downtown LA, surrounded by a city of homeless people, and LA didn't know what to do with it. Tommy and his son Matthew decided we need to do something. They convinced the city of LA to sell them a hospital for only $1 million. And it became the LA Dream Center, and now the LA Dream Center has dream centers all over. There's one in Kansas City, and the beauty of it is, guess what building the Kansas City Dream Center's in? The old Victoria Tabernacle. The building that H.W. Barnett pastored in, the legacy of his grandson carried back into this city. See, there's something about legacy. There's something about knowing where you are from. 40 years, 100 years, even in the last 3 years that we have merged from Village West into the Hope Chapel world, we have been a divinely created space where we have been connecting people to the fulfilling mission of leading people to experience real life of Jesus for the hope of the world. As for our personal 3-year Hope Chapel story, as of today, and I don't know what the count was today, but I'm going to guess. As of today, we have experienced 215% growth in 3 years. In 3 years. We've had over $1 million invested into our facility. We have a stronger serve and ministry culture. We have a children's learning center that, honestly, again, when you talk about things coming back to what God said, when we were still in Maryland, when we were still pastoring another church in Maryland, and knowing that we were going to make a transition back to Kansas City, we began to pray about what this would look like. And we were actually praying for a learning center. It was on our hearts that we were praying for a learning center. Years before it ever, probably 12 years before it ever came to be. But today we have it. It's fully staffed. We have, I don't even know how many kids now. It's grown exponentially just this new school year. And the vision has been the same this whole time. No drift. We have blue walls in all of our, when you walk out, you're going to see a blue wall. And you know what you're going to read? You're going to read the vision. You're going to see the vision to remind us of who we are and why we are. We've always, again, been about bringing others to Jesus who gives life. The scriptures say it this way, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. It's in this text that Jesus has described false teachers. In other words, he's saying, you know what? There are going to be, as you go through life, there are going to be places where there's going to be untruth. As you go through life, there are going to be places, Jesus talks about false saviors, places where we are tempted to put our trust in other things. So there are going to be places of untruth. There are going to be places where we're tempted to not trust. And then we have the enemy himself. These are all distractors from the mission and the divine design. And we see that if we look at it, even in our own community, we see the destruction that these things can bring compared to the abundant life that Jesus promises us. And so he wants us to understand that these things that are not truthful, these places that are these places where we don't trust him, where we put our trust in our own finances, or we put our trust in a substance, or we put our trust in a relationship, they're not going to give us the life that Jesus wants us to have. But yet Jesus is the good shepherd, and he's always drawing us. He's always bringing us to that ultimate fulfillment and abundant life. You know, people, programs around this place, they have changed. They have changed, but the vision never has. And we want to continue to be a place for people to find life and to find hope in Jesus. It's a vision to see God capture hearts in new ways. And so as we consider and celebrate where we've been, I want to talk about what it looks like in this next season for just a few moments. How do we reflect the very heart of God for this community? How do we reflect the very heart of God to this community? How do we continue to carry hope forward? It's one thing to know hope. It's one thing to have and to hold hope and to feel good that we know Jesus. But it's a totally different thing, church, to carry that forward and to lead people to experience life in him. Well, the ministry of Jesus was filled with stories where that's exactly what Jesus did, of leading people to experience life in him. We're going to talk about one of those stories. It's found in Mark chapter 2. It says, a few days later, when Jesus entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door. And he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." So here is Jesus. This is a homecoming. Jesus is coming home to this region called Capernaum. This isn't about geography, though, because it wasn't just that people were like, oh, Jesus is back in town. No, this was about a place of belonging. It was about a place of community. And when Jesus showed up back in town, it wasn't just a few of his old high school buddies came over and it's like, hey, Jesus, how's it going, man? What are you doing? What are you up to? No, people packed the house. They wanted to be in his presence. There's always something powerful about a place that Jesus can be found. You know that? There's always something powerful about, because it wasn't a synagogue. He wasn't in a holy place. He was in some guy's house. There's always something powerful about a place where Jesus can be found. What about this place? See, there needs to be something powerful about a place where Jesus can be found. Right? That's got to be part of what we do and why we do. That's got to be part of why we show up and why we're a part of this. The same is true in a modern church where it's known that the real Jesus can be found, can be known, can be experienced, and people want to be there. But it's more than just this hyper-spiritualized feeling that says that Jesus is in the room. It's not about the hype. It's about Jesus being recognizable in the authentic, faithful lives of people. That's how you know that Jesus is here. That's how you know that Jesus is in the house, is when you see it in each other, when you're experiencing it as you worship together, when you're experiencing it in the lobby, when you're experiencing it in community groups. It's got to be more than on a Sunday. If you have a one-day Jesus, you are missing it. John 17 says, I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. You know who he's talking about? He's talking about you. He's already prayed for the 12. He's already prayed for the disciples here in John 15, 16, and 17. This is about you and I. I pray for those who will believe in me through their message. That's you and me. That all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. So that the world may believe that you have sent me. I've given them the glory that you gave me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. He said, listen, how is the world going to know that Jesus exists? How is the world going to know that Jesus is here? How is the world going to know that Jesus is still operating on a everyday life basis? How is the world going to know? Google? We're back to that. They can just Google him. Figure it out, right? No. The only way that's going to happen is by us carrying the mission. But sometimes there are barriers to Jesus. Sometimes there are barriers to Jesus. You know that? There are things that keep people away from him. In this story, there's a paralyzed man who had friends that were determined to get him to Jesus. But as they approached the place where Jesus could be experienced, they automatically went, oh, we got a problem. This is an impossible situation. And Mark describes the scene as these four guys roll up. They say they gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door. There was no way in. This was not going to be an easy task to get someone to Jesus. This was not going to be, oh, just show up, come to the front doors of the church. Two wonderful guys or ladies are going to open the door. They're going to say, hey, how are you doing? So good to see you. Have a bulletin. Come on in. Grab some coffee. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be easy all the time. So what is barrier number one? Barrier number one are the crowds. The crowds. The very people who came to hear Jesus had become the barrier. It wasn't intentional. Probably none of them even knew that this guy was going to show up that day. They didn't have it in their minds, oh, let me make sure that whoever comes to church today doesn't hear about Jesus. It wasn't intentional opposition. They just wanted to get as close to Jesus as they could. They just wanted to get all of Jesus that they could. They wanted to make sure they got him first. Unintentional barriers. See, it's a reminder that sometimes the greatest obstacle of people finding Jesus isn't opposition. It isn't their lack of resource. It isn't a need in their life. But sometimes the unintentional barriers are you and I. We can be the barrier to Jesus. We can be the thing that keeps people away. Sometimes it's in how we act. Sometimes it's in how we act. Sometimes we create barriers just by being unaware of people who have needs. We don't think about the fact that there may be somebody who can come to the front doors, who can come into a moment like this, and their needs are great. They may have it all put together. They may look great, and we're not thinking about their need. See, after these friends realized there wasn't a good front door, they still determined to get their friend into the presence of Jesus. And even though there was no way through, they decided, then we're going to go over. We're going to go over. The second barrier becomes the ceilings. Sometimes it's the crowd. Sometimes we can be a barrier. Sometimes the way we act in this building, sometimes the way we act outside of this building are barriers to people coming to Jesus. You're like, they don't know that I go to church. They'll find out soon enough. So, but other times it's the ceiling. Other times there are ceilings that are in their life. These friends initially saw the roof as an opportunity. I love this story. I love this story because of these four guys. I cannot imagine being these four guys who get there with their friend. They're like, man, this dude is getting to Jesus. But here's what I know. They didn't bring rope with them. They didn't bring a ladder with them. They didn't bring all the tools to make this happen. These guys are on the fly figuring this out. And they're trying to, there's three guys at the bottom going, okay, we got him. And a guy on the top going, okay, I'm pulling. They're trying to just get this guy up on the roof. It's the only way they had, right? But sometimes the roof represents limitations and not opportunities. Sometimes there are ceilings that keep people from meeting Jesus. I love the fact, again, that they didn't see this man's need. Again, think about this. I have a paralyzed guy. I kind of would like for him to help in this process. You're trying to get someone to come up to, and you're like, hey, could you at least, put your foot in the ground? Could you at least, pull your own weight? This guy can't do that. He can't do that. But they're still intent on making this happen, right? And they found ways to work around the need, to bypass all the excuses. See, there's some people in your lives, there are some people in all of our lives probably that are spiritually paralyzed. We throw around the phrase church hurt. We throw around a lot of different phrases, but those things are real. They're very real. And what happens when people are paralyzed by their pain, by their trauma, by hurt, by the way they were treated? What happens when they're paralyzed? What do we come up? Well, they would never want to come to church. They would never want to come to community group. And we make the excuses for them instead of going and finding the rope and finding the ladder, finding the opportunity. These guys are putting that away. These guys are taking that away, and they're bypassing all of the excuses. These four friends see the roof obstacle as nothing more than a creative possibility. And they begin to think creatively. They begin to work together. They begin to take the risk. They begin to serve sacrificially. And when we choose to manage obstacles or leave them established and work around them, we allow something to keep us from the greatness of God in our lives. They did the things that others were not willing to do to get their friend to Jesus. You're like, how do you know that? Come on, let's think this through. Let's just be human and rational for just a minute. In a crowd that large, don't you think that somebody else brought a friend to Jesus? Don't you think that there was a parent in that room that brought their sick child? Don't you think that there was a friend who brought the lame or the blind or the possessed into that moment? But they were willing to stay safe. They were willing to stay on the ground. See, what can we begin to create in our own lives that says, I'm not going to play it safe when it comes to bringing people to Jesus? I'm not going to play it staying on the ground, and I'll just wait my turn to get somebody to him. I'm going to the roof. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that this happens. Whether it's your friend that needs to come through the front door, or whether it's a child who's already here and needs ministry, or whether it's somebody whoever it is. The scriptures say when Jesus, let me back up. The scriptures say that when Jesus saw their faith. See, we tend to look at the people in our lives and go, oh, if they just had a little more faith, they might come to Jesus. If I could just get them to have just a little more faith, they might come to Jesus. Jesus didn't look at the man's faith. He looked at the friend's faith. He looked at your faith and my faith. He didn't look at the guy's faith. The guy didn't have any faith. And guess what? That was okay. Oh, I just need my parent. I just need this person in my life to have just a little more faith. I'm just going to keep talking Jesus into their life. Jesus looks at our faith and says, now I can work in his life. Why? Because he had a group of people who were willing to do sacrificial things, who were willing to take risks, who were willing to go above and beyond where they needed to be. His friends were willing to move crowds and break ceilings. Church, are we willing to do that? Are we willing to move crowds? To get us out of the way and to break ceilings. And you're like, yeah, but it wasn't their house. Did that guy have insurance? You know what? Isn't that amazing? This wasn't their house. This was somebody else's home. And they're like, sorry, dude, this guy needs Jesus. We're like, ooh, can't offend anybody. Can't hurt. Don't want to break that ceiling. Somebody might not like it. These guys busted through those moments. At Hope Chapel, we are committed to moving crowds and breaking ceilings for other people and for the glory of God. There are people in this church who are committed to making sure that those avenues are open. See, sometimes we move crowds. We don't let people already here become barriers for those who need to get here. We have done a lot of work. There have been times that we've had hard conversations and said, listen, you can't act that way. You've got to be friendly. You smile once. Right? We're willing to ask, who can't get to Jesus because of how we behave or how we have organized ourselves? Who can't get there because of how we are structuring? Who can't sit in our row because it's our row? And sometimes we need to break ceilings. When traditional methods don't work, we've got to begin to think even more creatively. And I got to tell you, Pastor Brooke and I are pretty creative people. But it's more than just us. I sat with our leadership team, and I heard some of the most creative things out of their mouths. And it was awe-inspiring to me. It was encouraging to me as a pastor to know that there are people here who are willing to say, nah, we tried that. Let's do this. Sometimes reaching the next generation requires going to the roof. And we use new approaches and new methods, and we have new courage for other people. All of our existence, did you see the pictures? A tent that seated 2,000 people. That was from 1951. That was 1951. That's crazy. Singing Christmas trees. That's nuts, right? Just the thought of building that out and going, sorry, Joe, you got to go to the top, dude. Buses that we've ran, rake and bakes that we've done where we just raked people's, in Missouri, that's a totally different term, rake and bake, but some of you will get that. Raking people's leaves. Just so that they could see Jesus in somebody, right? Egg hunts, Alpha. It's all creative ways. And for years, we've been creative in how we reach people. But can I tell you something? The next generation faces barriers that we have never seen. Digital distractions steal their attention and their imagination. Economic pressures add stress and limit family time. generational gaps that can cause such great distance and understanding. I saw a stat that said middle schoolers represent the highest speed of human development on the planet. Say, what does that mean? They are changing more rapidly than anybody else on the planet, sometimes daily. And all the middle school parents said, oh my. No, physically, emotionally, spiritually, the middle school, those 6th, 7th, and 8th years, is such transition, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up. You say, well, Kim, oh no, what are we going to do? We're going to the roof again. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the roof again. We're going to find new ways to help people meet Jesus. We are committed once again to helping the next generation. And when I say next generation, I'm not just talking about kids and students. I'm talking about families of next gen. I'm talking about young families that are coming up, raising these kids. We are going to stand strong and on faithful shoulders of those who have gone before and who still believe in the mission. Let me give you a couple of ways that we're already doing this, and then we're gonna close this out. One of the ways that we're already doing this is we're ministering to the economic needs of families through Giving Hope and through Open Arms. These are two opportunities. Here at Legends, we are connected to Giving Hope, but these opportunities make food and clothing and dignity available. It removes the barriers of hunger and physical need, but it also opens the door to real conversations into some other dysfunctional systems and ways so that we can lead people to a place that, yes, they're hungry, but it also shows that they have a hunger for God. There's something in their spirit that needs to be addressed as well. We're addressing educational barriers through Trellis. Trellis offers a debt-free education path for university students at the undergrad and grad levels who are called into pastoral ministry. Most ministry students, guys, when they go to because most ministry schools are private. KU does not have a biblical studies program that I know of. Correct me if I'm wrong. So these are private. And y'all know what private education costs, right? And then we're bringing these pastors out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and going, we're going to pay you peanut butter and jelly wages. Go win the world. Trellis doesn't do that. We are offering debt-free education to people going into ministry. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we got collegiates over here. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Hope Academy. Hope Academy in both Olathe and Legends is a 5-day-a-week learning center. And again, we're removing barriers for working families who have these complex caregiving situations. I spoke to a family when we were trying to get this started. He worked Monday, she worked Tuesday, he worked Wednesday, she worked Thursday. You know why? Because they could not find daycare. Now they can. And of course, Hope Kids. Hope Kids is our children's ministry here in all of our locations, but here at Legends. Hope Kids is removing barriers that make church intimidating for children. Right now, I hate to say this, they're probably having more fun than you are. But we also have some other things. We have a small group coming up called Intentional Motherhood coming in the fall. Our men's group is just doing amazing things. There are outings. We took 22 guys to a Royals game. They have 14, 15, 16 guys going skeet shooting next week. I mean, we have these incredible breakfasts for guys. You're like, well, that's not next gen. It is when we're training dads to be men of God. It is when we're training husbands to do it the right way, to be spiritual leaders. We're breaking down language barriers by empowering a Spanish-speaking culture through our congregation. We have hopes here one day of having a Spanish-speaking context in this building. I've got guys right now chomping at the bit to do that right now. We happen to be one of the most diverse locations in all of Hope Chapel. And we know that because we are in the most diverse geographical culture area that there is. And we want to address that. And finally, over the last, we've had ministry expression to the fast-paced, ever-changing culture of student ministry. For the past few years, it's been called Kairos, which meant God's perfect time. How many of you knew that? By the way, how many of you knew what Kairos meant? 3, 4, yeah, 3, 4. If someone came to you and go, hey, does your church have a youth group? You'd go, I think so. There's this black K thing. I have no idea what that is. So guess what? We decided to do away with that. And we have changed some things. In the past 5 years, there's been some name changes, Hope in the Hope Chapel universe. Olathe, as you saw, was Indian Creek, just because it was on Indian Creek. So Hope Chapel Creek Kids has now become Hope Kids. Little Treasures is now Hope Academy. We merged from Village West Family Church to now Hope Chapel Legends. And so Kairos, again, was very confusing. And so we've changed the name, and it's now Hope Chapel Youth. There you go. It's now Hope Chapel Youth, HCY. I guess it's cool when it's YTH. I'm too old. I don't know. But here's what we know about that generation. Here's what we know about them. Even though that generation is facing anxiety, depression, loneliness at unprecedented rates, even though they're confronted with more vivid brokenness, dysfunction, and sin at younger ages and a more rapid pace, that generation is asking some of the biggest questions of purpose and meaning than any generation. I know some of us are scared to sit down and talk with a student. I challenge you to do that. I challenge you to do that. Sit and talk with them. Even though they're questions you may not have the answer for, they're asking some of the best questions in history right now. So let me remind you of an old African proverb. I'm going to make a little twist in it, though. It takes a community of faith to empower and impact a generation. You know that proverb as it takes a village to raise a child. But in faith, it takes a community of faith to empower and impact a generation. Because if you're not involved in the process, guess what? You become a barrier to the process. If we're not involved in the process of bringing hope to people, if we're not involved in the process of reaching the next generation, we become the crowd. We become the barrier to the process. You say, Ken, how can I do this? You can serve in our ministries. Knew that was going to go dead silent. Knew it. You can serve in one of our ministries. You're like, even if I serve in the coffee shop? Yes, even if you serve in the coffee shop. You don't have to serve in kids. We need you to serve in kids. You don't have to serve with students. We definitely need you to serve in students. But again, how are you bringing hope to people? Volunteer to serve in a classroom, to help out in a student event. Babysit for one of these young families so that mom and dad can have a date night. Come on. Let's see if I get an amen right here. Host a youth community group at your house. Okay. I put the pressure on you. Parents, prioritize Jesus in your family during the formative years of their life. Baseball's not getting them to heaven, guys. It's important, it's fun, they're learning skills. But if we don't prioritize Jesus, we become the barrier. We become the barrier. You can commit to praying for our next gen. You can commit to make every school zone you drive through a prayer zone. You hate those school zones. I know you do. I do. And it pulls up and it's blinking and you're like, I missed it. As you're going through that school zone at 25 miles an hour. use that time to pray for students. Make that school zone a prayer zone. Take a Sunday out of worship to join the prayer team as a student prayer advocate. Become spiritual fathers and mothers. You're like, Ken, I'm not that old. Okay, be a big brother, big sister spiritually to someone in our church. No? Okay. See, we're still at a congregational size where every student should have someone in their faith corner. Little guys, 2 years old, they need someone besides mom and dad in their faith corner. Students that are in high school, they need someone in their faith corner. Step into those roles, not in a creepy way. Don't just start hanging out with students if you're my age. That's creepy. Today we're going to start something new. It's called the Faith Ministries Fund, and each year we try to scholarship as many kids as we can for camp and Wonder Week and fall retreats and all these things. And as we move forward, we want to make an investment at the beginning of the school year, and so we're going to continue to invest a portion of our budget towards family ministries, but this fund will allow us to meet some of those scholarship needs. So when you go on to the app or when you go on to the website, to the giving page, there's actually going to start being a drop-down menu item that says Faith Fund or Family Fund. And that way we can, again, encourage families, especially families who have numerous kids, that we can encourage them, and there can be scholarships throughout the year. You can even give in the boxes on the back. You can do it online, however you want to do it. See, for close to a century now, our church has been in the business of moving crowds and breaking ceilings. This shouldn't be anything new for us. But it happens when we get to watch God use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. These 4 guys, we don't know their names. We don't know where they came from. We never hear a word about them again. Just 4 guys, ordinary guys, who were willing to do something extraordinary so that someone could find Jesus. The vision, the mission has never changed. I'm going to ask the team to come. So the question is, will we be the kind of people who get creative? Will we be the kind of people who are willing to get our hands dirty? Maybe even physically. Who go to the extremes when we see a crowd that needs moved or a ceiling that needs breaking. Maybe you're here today and you're like, Ken, I'm one of those people facing the barriers. I have a family member that, I don't know, Ken, they seem so unreachable. Maybe there's a neighbor who you've never invited. Maybe you're at a stage in your life and you look at this younger generation and you're like, Ken, they're weird. I don't get them. I just don't get them. Maybe there's a need in our community that feels overwhelming to you. Remember what we learned from those 4 friends in Mark 2. They didn't wait for someone else to act. They didn't let the crowd discourage them. They got creative when the normal path was blocked. They worked together to accomplish what none of them could have done alone. And we believe that this is our moment to till the soil for the next season. And we believe that there is a greater urgency than there's ever been. Just as those who came before us and planted seeds, they never saw them fully harvest. We plant today for the futures that we may never witness. See, here's the deal. What you do in this building, you're not doing for yourself. You're not doing that for yourself. We're creating spaces for the next generation of people and families to connect with the transforming presence of Jesus so that they can be formed and fulfilled. So here's the 2 questions. Will you stand with me? Here's the 2 questions that I want you to consider this morning. I want you to consider them this week. What barrier am I creating that keeps people from getting to Jesus? I mean, can we just all humble ourselves a minute and really look at that question? That's an easy question to go, oh, that's not me. Next question. Come on. Let's just be really honest. What barriers am I creating that are keeping people from getting to Jesus? It could be your attitude. It could be a judgment. It could be behavior. It could be your desire to receive more of Jesus first. Maybe it's the way you talk about, those people or that generation. Could it be that our comfort has become the obstacle? Second question, what ceiling am I called to break for someone else? Maybe it's reaching across generational lines, economic lines, cultural barriers. Perhaps it's using your skills or resources or influence in a new way. Could it be that God is calling you to think creatively, just like those four guys? I said, Ken, I don't know. Well, remember what I said, when you don't know where to go back to where he was last. And the last thing he said as he handed the eternal mission into our hands was this: all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So it's not a matter of you and I having the ability or you and I having the access. He says, go make disciples of all nations. That means generations too. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you, and surely I am with you to the very end of the age. So here's the last thing that God said to you. Here's the last thing, the last physical voice that Jesus made on this earth. Go impact the world in my name. If you don't know what to do, I just told you. This is what he said. Go impact the world in my name. Here's why. Someone is waiting for you to recognize their need, to know where Jesus is, and to be